going through every single betting market for the 2026 US Senate elections and filling out this blank map we've got here. So we're going to start on the West Coast and then move eastward. Starting with the first state, we have the state of Oregon. Generally, the state is very reliably in the Democratic Party's column. The Portland area tends to drive the Democratic momentum of this state, generally further to the left. So I'm going to be putting that one into the safe blue rating. We're just going to do safe blue or safe red, no sort of in between middles, but that's going to be the call there in Oregon. Next up, we have the state of Idaho. I have a strong suspicion of which way I think the state will go, but for now, we will check. Go to the Idaho Senate tracker odds for that race. Currently, interestingly enough, Idaho, the independent, actually has a better chance of winning. It's still virtually pointless, but because the Republican is going to win, but it is an interesting feat that the independent is ahead of the Democrat. Probably that vote splitting hurts Democrats and the independent chances even more. But Idaho, as I predicted, would likely end up being in the safe red column. Next up, we have Montana Senate. This race is a bit interesting. We're going to check out the betting markets for it. Montana Senate winner. Here we are. So this one puts the Republican at about a 90% chance of winning the election, which I think is fairly reasonable. Generally, Republicans do well in this seat. There was a Democratic senator from the state of Montana about 2 years ago, John Tester. He ultimately lost his reelection bid in 2024, along with several other Democrats. That resulted in a Republican takeover of the Senate. But as far as Montana goes, I think that this state will almost certainly vote red. That's going to be the call there in Montana. Heading a little bit now south to Wyoming. This race will probably be even less competitive than the Senate race in Montana, but we will have to see. Montana Senate winner. Currently, Democrats have about a 2% chance of winning, so that is going to be solidly in the Republican Party's column. Heading now to Colorado. The state will probably be better for the Democratic Party in terms of their chances. We'll have to see, though. So, Colorado Senate winner, currently John Hickenlooper, has over 95% chance of winning. I think that is fairly reasonable to expect. That's going to be the call there in the state of Colorado. I forgot Alaska. We will do Alaska now. Alaska Senate is going to be a really interesting race to watch. This one, Mary Peltola, the Democratic nominee, is going up against Dan Sullivan, the incumbent Republican senator. Mary Peltola's odds in the beginning were not looking great, but this might be when she announced that she was going to run. Since then, the odds have flipped and have largely supported the Democrat in this race. Mary Peltola predicted to win the state of Alaska. Back down to New Mexico now. This state is probably going to be less competitive, but it does generally vote blue on the majority of elections. So we're going to go New Mexico Senate. That state, less than a 3% chance of the Republican winning. New Mexico used to be more of a swing state, but it has now drifted further and further into the Democratic Party's category, along with many other parts of the Sun Belt. I think in the long run that they will become very Democratic friendly. And now we're going to head back north to South Dakota. South Dakota pretty much always votes red. South Dakota generally is in the Republican Party's column. We'll have to see the Senate race in the state, which way it's looking. Currently, the Democrat is about what I expected, at about 2% chance. That's going to be the call there in the state of South Dakota. Going to put that into the safe red column. And now we have a bit of an interesting seat, the seat in Nebraska. Nebraska Senate is going to be an interesting race to watch for sure. Currently, the independent, this is probably in an independent's best hope at winning a Senate seat, is probably comes with Dan Osborne. He is currently sitting at about 30% chance likelihood of winning. The Democrat that was in this race just dropped out and endorsed Dan Osborne, so I think that won't really be much of a factor. Osborne really needs to get the votes from all the Democrats as well as the majority of the independents and many Republicans even. But I think Dan Osborne, about 30% chance, he's still most likely going to lose, so I will keep that state in the Republican Party's column. Now we have the state of Kansas, which will be possibly a little more competitive, probably less competitive than the state of Nebraska for Dan Osborne, but in Kansas, the Senate right now, it's looking like about an 80-20 split. Generally, the state does vote red. The Kansas City metropolitan area tends to shift the state somewhat further to the left. There is one Democratic congressional district there in the state of Kansas, but I think that state at large will almost certainly vote red. That brings Democrats to 38 seats, to Republicans 37. Now we have the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma virtually always votes red. There isn't very much there to say about it. Generally, the state is pretty solidly Republican on virtually every sort of election. We're going to try to find the Oklahoma Senate prediction map for Oklahoma. There is currently about a 4% chance the Democrat wins. I think that the Democrat stands virtually no chance, but that's going to be the call there in Oklahoma. And now we have Texas, a very competitive state. Not always the most competitive, but this year it is shaping up to be very competitive. It is one of the closest prediction markets I've seen at the moment. This is wrong one. We're going to head now to here. So this currently has Tallarico. For the first time, it's gone back and forth. It's been a tight game, but currently has Tallarico with the very slight edge at 51. It's virtually a coin flip, 50-50, according to the betting markets. So Tallarico is up narrowly, though, so that will be a much-needed win for the Democratic Party in the state of Texas. Crazy to see Texas blue, but I think this November there's a possibility. In my real predictions, I have the state generally going red, but in this betting markets, according to the betting markets, that's what they say in Texas. And now we have Minnesota, the state I checked earlier. Generally, the state votes blue. We're going to do a check real quick, though, for the Minnesota Senate. Currently, Republicans have about a 9% chance. I feel like that's probably too high, but that is going to be the call there in Minnesota, safe blue. Then we have the state of Iowa. This one is going to be a relatively competitive race. This is a state that is kind of ground that Republicans really don't want to lose, because if they lose here, it means they're probably losing worse in the more competitive swing states. Iowa generally votes red, but it is very close, interestingly enough. It's about 50-50. Currently, the Republican does have the edge, though, at about 52%. So I will call it as such, but that's going to be the call there in Iowa. Now we're going to go to Arkansas. Arkansas is virtually never competitive in recent elections, however. Currently, Tom Cotton, the Republican senator, has about a 92% chance likelihood, so that is nothing crazy about what we would expect. That will put Arkansas into the safe Republican range. And then we have the state of Louisiana. Louisiana is sometimes a little more competitive, but it generally votes red. And we're going to try to find the Senate election here. Louisiana Senate. This will give us a better idea of which way the state is leaning. Currently, the Democrat is at about an 8% chance. That seems a little bit high, but that's what the markets have it as. And now we're going to move over to the state of Illinois. Illinois is, thanks largely to the Chicago metropolitan area, is generally pretty safe, reliably blue. In some elections, it will go towards the likely blue instead of safe blue, but nonetheless, in the Democratic Party's column, the Democrats have about a 95% chance, a little bit over 95% chance of winning this seat. Nothing too crazy. I think that is very reasonable to expect. Next, we're going to do Kentucky and Tennessee. In Kentucky, this race, I have gotten some comments from you guys thinking that it may be a little bit more competitive than I am predicting. I think it will fairly safely be in the Republican Party's column. Currently, Andy Barr is leading with about 94% with that 94% edge in the betting markets. That seems reasonable to me. It seems like about what it'd be. So Kentucky going red. Next up, we have Tennessee. Tennessee is been gerrymandered quite a bit on the House level and has resulted in most likely Republicans picking up some seats in the state of Tennessee this November. Tennessee is going to Senate election. Currently, the Democrat is at about a 6% chance, so that is not looking good for the Democrat. These states will almost certainly be in their respective political parties' column. Then we're going to go to some southern states. Actually, we'll head up to Michigan first. Michigan is a fairly competitive Senate election. This one has been in the news. The more progressive option of the Democratic primary ended up winning, and he is taking on Mike Rogers. Currently, the Democrat is leading the Republican at about a 60-40 split. Things did get a little closer when the progressive candidate won, but since then have kind of shifted slightly in favor of the Democrat. So I'm going to put the state of Michigan into the blue Democratic column. Now we're going to go to Mississippi. Mississippi and Alabama virtually always vote red. The state of Alabama actually had a Democratic senator in the not too far distant past, Doug Jones, and he is running again for the Senate election in Alabama. This time around, I do not think he will win. The primary reason he won in the state of Alabama was because his opponent had some pretty serious scandals that had certainly hurt the Republicans' chances, and that ultimately resulted in the Democrat Doug Jones winning election. But as far as Mississippi goes, about an 8% chance. That's good for the Democrats. Going to put that into the safe red column. And then Alabama, kind of already hinted at it, but I do think the state will vote red. According to the betting markets, we're going to give that Alabama Senate winner about a 5% chance for the Democrats. So again, below 10%, almost certainly will vote Republican. Going to put that in the state of Alabama. Now we're going to move on to Florida and Ohio. Florida and Ohio used to be very competitive seats on the presidential and Senate and gubernatorial level in the past. Since then, they've drifted further to the right in the era of Trump, especially Florida more so. That state used to be a real toss-up, so was Ohio. But we're going to start with Ohio. In the state of Ohio, the state I generally have the Democrat winning. The betting markets tend to support that. This race has Sherrod Brown at about a 55% chance of winning. It's gone back and forth with who's been in the lead since about March, though. However, Sherrod Brown has fairly consistently been in the lead. He's a former senator from the state, so I think that he knows how to run a good campaign in Ohio. So I'm going to put that state, and because the betting markets indicate it, I'm going to put that state into the Democrats column. Heading now to Georgia. Georgia, John Ossoff is running for re-election, and I think that he will most likely end up winning. Currently, according to the betting markets, he has about a 92% chance, which is a very impressive feat for Democrats in a state that 2 years ago in 2024 went to Trump by it was a swing state, so it wasn't a blowout, but it was certainly a victory on the Republican end. Now we're going to go down to Florida, which will probably be a different story. Generally, Florida, I hinted at it earlier, but tends to vote red depending on the election. But Florida, currently the Democrat has about a 9% chance of winning, so that sounds roughly right. That's going to be the call there in the state of Florida. I'm going to put Florida into that column. Now we have South Carolina and North Carolina. I'm going to start with South Carolina. South Carolina is generally a lot more conservative and Republican friendly than the state of North Carolina is. Generally, they both vote red on the presidential level. But as far as this is the Republican Senate special primary, South Carolina Senate winner. So this one has the Democrat at about a 12% chance, which is not great, but that is somewhat impressive that the Democrat has gotten past 10%. Regardless, though, that's going to be in the safe red column. Next up, we're going to go to the state of North Carolina. In North Carolina, the state is most likely going to be voting blue. Currently, there is a former governor of the state on the Democratic side, Ray Cooper, running as the Democratic nominee with the Republican, currently Michael Motley. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But as you can see, North Carolina has just really slipped away from the Republican party's column, especially in the Senate level. In the early days, it was fairly close, pretty much a dead heat, but really since late March, it's gone further and further into the Democratic Party's column, and that is why I'm going to put that one into the safe blue rating. And then we have the state of Virginia. Generally, Virginia votes blue. The state used to be somewhat competitive. It was, in the past, a little more Republican friendly. The state has elected a Republican governor, though, before the current governor, the prior governor. So the state has been known to be a little more, somewhat competitive, but I think this Senate election is really showing that it will most likely remain in the Democratic Party's column. And then we have the state just to the west, West Virginia, in the column for the, wrong market. Generally, West Virginia is quite a bit more conservative and Republican friendly than the state of Virginia is. As you can see here, about a 5% chance for the Democrat to win. Definitely not a good position to be in. Going to put that state into the safe red column. And then we have Delaware, New Jersey as the next two. Delaware, this state virtually always votes blue. In 2024, however, the state did go from safe blue to likely blue, just because 2024 was certainly not a good year for the Democratic Party. But according to the Senate odds for this November's election, currently the Democrat is at about 97% chance. I think this is fairly reasonable to expect. I'm going to call Georgia for the Democrats. That brings them to 47, to Republicans 48 seats. Next up, New Jersey. New Jersey is somewhat competitive. In the past, it's elected Republicans and Democrats. It's generally moved further to the left, however. Currently, the Senate election chances have Cory Booker at about a 98% chance, which is very impressive. He's a well-liked senator, and I think that is going to be just a telling sign the state will almost certainly go blue. Rhode Island and Massachusetts are the next two now. Rhode Island and Massachusetts virtually always vote red. New England is vote blue. New England is a pretty democratically favored area. Virtually always votes for Democrats. 97% chance for the Senate election chances in the state of Rhode Island. Definitely a small state, but still one more senator for the Democratic Party. Next up, we have Massachusetts. Massachusetts tends to vote red, and generally the state votes red. Well, we're just going to go, generally the state votes blue. Massachusetts tends to very regularly elect Democrats. The state did have a Republican senator, and the Republican senator that's running is actually a former senator from the state, and he won as a Republican in the state of Massachusetts, which is a very impressive feat several elections ago. But as far as that district goes, Massachusetts, I can't, let's see here, having a hard time. General election voter turnout. There are quite a few betting markets we're going to skip to Maine. Troy Jackson is favored to win the election there. That's going to be, and then Massachusetts will almost certainly go blue. And then the final state, New Hampshire. This state, currently Democrats are already at a Senate majority of 51 seats. But for the state of New Hampshire, I think that the state will help Democrats increase their majority. The New Hampshire Senate currently odds sits at about 90% for the Democrat. So I'm going to put the final state of New Hampshire into the Democratic Party's column. bringing Democrats to 52 seats to Republicans 48, according to the betting markets. Like I said, not my real prediction, just a fun little hypothetical to see where the betting markets stand. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.